In the darkest depths of forgotten worlds, where the remnants of ancient empires lie buried beneath the earth, a terrifying force stirs once more. They are the perfect predators, creatures born of adaptation, bound by a single relentless will. These are the Slivers, and they have returned to reclaim their place as the ultimate apex predators of the multiverse. Welcome to the lore of Sliver Swarm, the pre-constructed deck that brings one of the Magic the Gathering's most feared and iconic creatures back to the battlefield. In this video we'll dive deep into the origins of the Slivers, the rise of one of their terrifying leaders, the Sliver Gravemother, and how their relentless evolution threatens every plane they touch. So I hope your coffee is warm. From their humble beginnings as beasts of burden to their apocalyptic resurgence, led by the all-powerful Sliver Gravemother, we'll explore the story behind this unstoppable hive. Each Sliver, from the capricious Sliver to the hatchery one, contributes to the deadly synergy that makes this deck a force to be reckoned with. Evolve, adapt, conquer. Long before the rise and fall of empires, a sentient species sought to harness the power of Slivers, using them as mere beasts of burden. The Slivers, however, were far more than simple creatures. They were born to adapt and evolve and to eventually outgrow their so-called masters. And this species would soon learn how grave a mistake it was to underestimate them. The Slivers, buried deep in the earth, thrived in dark winding caverns beneath every continent. Over time, these creatures grew stronger, their hive mind becoming more complex and formidable. They emerged from the shadows and began to lay waste to the civilizations that had once tried to control them. Their numbers swelled and their evolutionary process allowed them to adapt to any threat they encountered. But as quickly as they rose, their reign of terror seemed to falter. Powerful enemies drawn together by the threat of annihilation struck back. The Slivers, despite their resilience, were driven back to the brink of extinction. Their once vast numbers reduced to a scattered few. The world that had once feared them breathed a sigh of relief, believing that the nightmare was over. It was at this moment of apparent defeat that the Sliver Gravemother was born. Unlike any Sliver before her, she was a being of all colors, embodying the full spectrum of life, magic, and death, and all of evolution. Her emergence was not a mere act of evolution, but it was also a resurrection, an ascension that would mark the beginning of a new era for the Slivers. The Gravemother was not created to lead an already victorious swarm. She was born to revive a fallen one, give it one, if not more, shots at coming back. With the Gravemother's rise, the remnants of the Sliver horde were infused with new purpose. No longer just a hive mind, they now had a queen whose will was absolute, whose mind was vast and unknowable, and over time she gathered her scattered children hidden deep within the earth, where they waited in burial calderas for the day that they would rise again. For eons, the Gravemother prepared her brood, strengthening them, pushing them to evolve in ways that no other being could imagine. Finally, that day arrived. The Gravemother had completed the ultimate evolution, the power to conquer death itself. In a single catastrophic night, the kingdoms that had once flourished on this unknown plane were reduced to rubble. From their hidden calderas, the Lazotep Slivers emerged. Slivers whose bodies were armored with a terrifying mineral known as Lazotep, a substance with a history as dark as the Slivers themselves. Once wielded by a tyrannical dragon, Lazotep conferred unnatural resilience and power, turning the creatures it armored into undead warriors bound to their master's will. The Gravemother saw in Lazotep not just a means to protect her brood, but a way to perfect them. These Slivers were no longer merely living creatures, they were something more. Lazotep had fused with their very biology, turning them into eternal predators, their minds and bodies bound to the Grave Mother's will even in death. When one of these Lazotep-clad slivers, fell in battle, it did not simply die. Its essence would return to the hive where it could be reformed and sent back into the fray, even stronger than before. The kingdoms had no defense against this onslaught. Their fortresses, designed to repel conventional armies, crumbled under the relentless assault of these undead slivers. The Lazotep slivers, with their afflict ability, ensured that even when blocked, they inflicted pain and suffering on their enemies. The ground itself became a graveyard, yet from that graveyard rose new slivers and not new people. They were animated by the same Lazotep that had been their shield in life. Each new wave of slivers seemed even more relentless than the last, as if the very act of dying only made them more determined to fulfill their Grave Mother's ambitions. This was not just a battle, it was a reckoning, a night when the world learned that the slivers, once thought to be defeated, had returned, stronger and more terrifying than ever. The Grave Mother had resurrected her brood, and now nothing could stand in their way. In this night of reckoning, no corner of the plain was spared. Mountains were torn asunder as Lazotep slivers tunneled through them, landslides burying the fleeing remnants of shattered armies. Villages were razed, their inhabitants unable to escape the blue-black tide of undead predators. Castles, once symbols of power and safety, became tombs as the slivers swarmed over their walls, leaving no survivor in their wake. By dawn, the once thriving kingdoms had been utterly annihilated. The survivors, if there were any, were scattered and broken, haunted by the memory of Lazotep-clad monsters that could not be stopped by any means known to them. The plain itself seemed to shudder under the weight of this devastation, as if the very earth was mourning the loss of its people. But for the mother, this was only the beginning. She had perfected her brood with the power of Lazotep, creating an army that could conquer death itself. Now with this newfound power, she set her sights beyond this desolate world, eager to unleash her eternal brood upon the multiverse. The night that saw the rise of the Lazotep slivers marked the dawn of a new age of terror, one where even the strangest plains would tremble at the approach of the Grave Mother's horde. The earth itself trembled as slivers tore through mountains, razing villages and castles alike, and so did all of the multiverse. On a distant and unsuspecting plain, far removed from the devastation wrought by the Grave Mother and her brood, a new threat was beginning to take shape at the same time. The ambitious planeswalker Rukaramel, a biologist driven by an insatiable curiosity, had turned her gaze toward the slivers. She was captivated by their unparalleled ability to adapt and evolve, seeing in them the perfect subjects for her experiments. Rukaramel was not content to merely study these creatures from afar. She sought to harness their power, to understand the very essence of their adaptability and use it to create something entirely new. She didn't seem to have learned from these old civilizations that crumbled just before. Rukaramel's experiments began innocently enough. She carefully bred slivers, isolating specific traits and attempting to mimic the abilities of other creatures from across the multiverse. Her laboratory, hidden deep within the molten wastelands of her home planet, became a crucible of evolution. It was here that she first succeeded in creating a new breed of sliver, one that bore the unpredictable marks of her tempering, the capricious sliver. The capricious sliver was unlike any other sliver before it. Infused with chaotic energy, it thrived in the volatile environment of the wastelands, its body crackling with lightning that could ravage the battlefield with every attack. But this was not merely a display of raw power. The capricious sliver embodied the very essence of adaptability. With each strike, it had the ability to exile the top card of its controller's library, allowing Rukaramel to cast that card. This unpredictable ability made the capricious sliver a living embodiment of evolution in action, constantly adapting, learning from its environment, and turning the tide of battle in ways that no other creature could match. However, Rukaramel's fascination with the slivers blinded her to the danger she was unleashing. In her quest to create the perfect organism, she failed to recognize the subtle influence of the Grave Mother and the other sliver leaders, whose reach extended far beyond their own planes. The Grave Mother's connection to the hive mind of the slivers was absolute, and no sliver, no matter how far removed, could escape her influence. Rukaramel's experiments, though driven by her own ambition, were unwittingly paving the way for the sliver's return on a scale that even she could not comprehend. As the capricious sliver and its kin grew in power on her plane, the hive mind began to stir. The Grave Mother, ever watchful from her distant throne, sensed the presence of new creations and began to subtly exert her influence. The slivers under Rukaramel's control started to exhibit strange behaviors, their actions becoming more coordinated, their attacks more strategic. It was as if they were being guided by an unseen hand, one that had waited eons for this moment. Rukaramel, so consumed by her own brilliance, failed to see the signs. She continued her experiments, each new success only furthering the Grave Mother's designs. The capricious sliver was but the first of many slivers that would emerge from Rukaramel's lab, each one more dangerous and unpredictable than the last. But in her hubris, Rukaramel believed she could control them, that she could bend these creatures to her will. She was wrong. The Grave Mother's influence grew stronger with each passing day, and soon the slivers began to outgrow Rukaramel's control. The hive mind, now fully reawakened on her own plane, began to override her commands, the slivers acting with a will of their own. Rukaramel's creation had not only resurrected the slivers in body, but had also reconnected them to the Grave Mother's relentless will. The biologist who had once sought to play God now found herself at the mercy of the very creatures she had tried to master. As the capricious sliver let its skin in a revolt against its creator, Rukaramel realized too late that her actions were folly. The Grave Mother had been patient, biding her time until the perfect moment to strike. With Rukaramel's help, she had achieved what had once seemed impossible, the resurrection of her brood on another plane, not just as remnants of a lost empire, but as a force poised to conquer the multiverse once more. The plane that had once been Rukaramel's sanctuary was now a breeding ground for the slivers and a crossroads for them to get into every little piece of the multiverse. And as Rukaramel watched her creation slip beyond her grasp, she knew that the Grave Mother's legacy was far from over. It was just the beginning, and what a beautiful sight it was. As the Grave Mother and her brood prepared to launch their final attack, the land itself seemed to shudder in fear. The skies darkened and the very air grew thick with tension, as if the world knew it was about to be consumed by a force beyond comprehension. The slivers, with their unmatched adaptability and ferocity, were poised on the edge of a cataclysmic assault. The hive is a living, breathing entity, constantly evolving to meet every challenge that stands in its way. And in the midst of this chaos, things grew worse. Regal slivers began to emerge from the ranks. These noble slivers distinguished themselves by their commanding presence, and they've risen above their kin, each one vying for leadership within the hive, and only the best ones will continue with their leadership. Their appearance is a testament to the hive's natural selection process, where only the strongest and most capable are allowed to guide the swarm. The regal slivers grant their controller the coveted monarch status, symbolizing the hive's dominance and control over the battlefield. But their power does not end there. If the monarch is already present, these slivers further enhance their kin, bestowing +1 bonuses upon every sliver in the swarm. This strategic advantage ensures that the hive is always led by the most powerful and capable among them, reinforcing the Grave Mother's iron grip over her brood. Meanwhile, deep within the hive's hidden recesses, The hatchery slivers work tirelessly to multiply the swarm's numbers. These industrious creatures possess the replicate ability, allowing them to create perfect copies of themselves whenever they are cast. This means that for every hatchery sliver brought into play, the battlefield is flooded with duplicates, rapidly swelling the ranks of the hive. Even after devastating losses, the hatchery slivers ensure that the swarm can bounce back with terrifying speed. A single hatchery sliver is capable of repopulating a devastated hive within a week, showcasing the sliver's unparalleled ability to recover from near extinction, as they have done before. This relentless drive to survive and multiply makes the hive an unstoppable force, always ready to overwhelm its enemies with sheer numbers. But brute strength alone is not enough to secure victory, at least not to the slivers who want total victory. The Grave Mother knows that cunning and strategy are just as important as raw power, and so she calls upon the taunting sliver to add a layer of deception to the hive's tactics. The sliver, with its massive hood and unsettling presence, is a master of manipulation, believe it or not. The taunting sliver goads opposing creatures into attacking, using its wings to draw enemies into its territory, and once engaged, these creatures find themselves trapped in a conflict they cannot escape, forced to face the full wrath of the hive. The taunting sliver turns the battlefield into a deadly game of cat and mouse, where the opponents are lured into traps. They are ever more anticipated and countered by the hive's collective intelligence. As the Grave Mother's assault intensifies, the skies above are filled with the roar of dragons. Whoa. The enchantment Descendants' Fury vividly portrays that scene, with mighty dragons, both young and old, laying waste to a city in a blaze of fire and fury. This enchantment captures the essence of intergenerational struggle, where each generation of dragons fights not just for their own survival, but for the legacy of those who came before and those yet to come. And this symbolizes the way in which slivers don't really care about their lives just right now, but also about the lives of slivers to come. The hive is always priority number one. The ability of Descendants' Fury reflects the cycle of battle. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player, you may sacrifice a creature to reveal and deploy a new creature of the same type from your library. This mirrors the idea that when one warrior falls, another rises to take their place, ensuring that the fight continues unabated. In the context of the slivers, this enchantment underscores the hive's relentless drive to evolve and adapt, with each new generation building upon the strength of the last. As the Grave Mother's forces press their advantage, the ground trembles beneath hooves, maybe, for the Ancestors, and a spell that captures the heroic charge of Celestian centaurs comes into play. The Celestians are known for their deep reverence for history and tradition. Channel the strength of their ancestors in times of need is whatever they need to do. This card allows players to choose a creature type and then look at the top 6 cards of their library and reveal any creatures of that type. The spell also has a flashback ability, allowing it to be cast from the graveyard, symbolizing the power of one's ancestors, which can be called upon even after they have passed. For the slivers, this instant reflects the hive's ability to draw strength from its fallen members, ensuring that their lineage and power continues to support the swarm in battle. Each sliver that falls is not lost, rather it becomes part of the hive's enduring legacy. It's just logical that some of the slivers will fall for others to evolve to become better versions of the previous ones. The battlefield is now a maelstrom of chaos and destruction, with the Grave Mother's brood dominating every front. The regal slivers ensure that the hive is led by the strongest, the hatchery ones swell the ranks with overwhelming numbers, and the taunting ones manipulate the enemy in making fatal mistakes. The enchantments and instants further amplify the hive's power by letting them learn from the previous iterations. Drawing on the strength of past generations, and ensuring that the fight continues no matter the cost. As the final assault reaches its climax, the Grave Mother watches with cold, calculating eyes. Her brood is not just a force of nature, it is the embodiment of evolution and survival, a relentless tide that will stop at nothing to achieve its ultimate goal. The multiverse itself seems to hold its breath, waiting for the inevitable outcome, and when the dust finally settles, only one truth remains. The Grave Mother's legacy will endure, and her brood will continue to evolve and conquer. No plane will ever be safe from the wrath of the Slivers. I'd like to thank you for watching, and please let me know what you think about this style of video where we make a story out of it and we kind of go off-road. Please let me know, and I wish you a very nice day. Bye.